This lovely Friday morning, we want to start preparing ourselves for next week. Climate talks are coming to Kenya. And we are going big on this. And we want to start that conversation now with a guest who's joining us. His name is Michael Onyango. He's the Deputy Executive Director at Alliance for Science. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Eric. Good morning, Du.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Great to be here.
Welcome to the hot seats.
Well, let's see. Don't sizzle me too much. Yes.
No, we'll try and maintain the temperature.
Climate talk, after all.
Yes,
It's cold outside, so maybe it's going to be in the situation room.
Studio warming.
Exactly.
Okay. Karibu sana.
Thank you.
You'll tell us about the Alliance for Science and what you do. And then we'll talk a lot about the Africa climate and implementing effective climate adaptation measures in Kenya, what's being done and what has been done. But let me welcome you to the conversation with the day's proverb, courtesy of CT. He's away this week. He'll be back on Monday. Maybe come back next week, you may find him. Today's proverb is from South Africa. And it says, dawn doesn't come twice to wake a person up. Dawn doesn't come twice to wake you up.
That is absolutely true. That is so true. And, it simply means that you've got to catch whatever it is at the moment and don't think twice. Make a move. Do not debate whether it's wrong or right. Just go ahead and do it. Better than doing nothing. Yes.
When opportunity strikes,
Exactly.
be ready to take it up.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes.
Very, very good.
Yes.
So tell us about Alliance for Science.
Great. So Alliance for Science, we are basically, we work primarily in the global south, but also the global north. But our biggest, where our biggest presence is in the global south. We are a science communication advocacy agency or network, if I may put it that way. And for us, the biggest thing that we do is to ensure that communities in the global south are able to understand science at its simplest level and uptake it. So for us, I think that is the greatest thing that we do as Alliance for Science. Yes, we have a big presence here in Kenya. Actually, our Global South Hub is present here in Kenya. But we're also present in Latin America. We're also present in Southeast Asia. We do have a presence in the Global North. We're housed at Cornell University there. But like I said, our biggest presence is here. And why is the Global South so important? Well, 79% of the world's population, resides in the Global South. Yeah, and 39% of the global GDP is also from the Global South. So those are the reasons why we're particularly in that area. And I think some of the areas of interest, when I say that we try to make science totally understandable in its simplest forms, is some of the buckets, of course, is food and nutrition. The other one is global health. The other one is climate change, hence next week's climate summit. And the one which we're going to be coming up next year is actually going to be traditional food and technologies. So that's something new that we're onboarding on. Right.
When you say that you want to make sure that communities understand science in its simplest form,
Right.
how do you do this?
Well, what we do is, first and foremost, a lot of the scientists that actually work on a lot of so-called innovative or new projects in the Global South are actually people from the Global South themselves, and they're people from local communities. So what we've done is we've started demystifying science by ensuring that we have a lot of the scientists now speaking in local vernacular stations, for one, so that they're able to communicate in people's first languages in terms of the different scientific innovations or different projects that they're working on. But beyond that, also in terms of communicating, we have a lot of our resources which we've actually gone ahead and translated into local languages. So, for example, because we're in Kenya, I'll just give an example. In Kenya, we've currently translated about 10 different languages, issues around agriculture, so the people at the local level can be able to understand that. Yes, right.
All right. So climate is the it's a buzz conversation.
Yes.
It's been that way for some years.
Yes.
We're looking at the first ever Africa Climate Summit taking place now next week. What would you say? I mean, sure, Kenya being the host of this, but what would you say are the issues that Kenya as a country is grappling with when it comes to this whole climate conversation then that must be addressed?
We just came out of the biggest drought ever, for the last 4 years, which has never happened before. But also just to, to ground it, I think, yes, climate is something that affects all of us across the world. And I'm happy that the Climate Summit is coming into Kenya for more reasons than one. First of all, Kenya is, a lot of people know this, is the only country in the world that has the most ecological zones. We've got 6 ecological zones. So I think that gives us a right to host the African Climate Summit. Brownie points to host it next week.
Okay.
But as you've said, one of the things is that again, Kenya, only 1/3 of Kenya is arable. I think that is another big reason. And despite our challenges, we have tried very hard in terms of feeding ourselves and in terms of all the various hiccups, and in terms of all the mitigations and the problems that have come out of the climate catastrophes that we've faced over the past last years or so. And as you know, starting from today, September, going on to December, we're going to have extraordinary rains. So being the host for the Africa Climate Change and having all the challenges that we did, I think we've got some big wins that we've also had as Kenya, which puts us in the right place to host this. And just not very far from here, in fact, neighboring us here, which is Kajiado County, I think that's a great example of some of the things that we have done, because Kenya is actually, when people think about Kenya, the first thing, or the first people that come to the mind are Maasais.
Yeah.
And, the Maasais, the Maa community, rightfully, have been so, and a great example of the people who've been affected by the climatic changes that have happened. But we have seen them over the last 4 years having changed their lifestyles in order to adapt to the various effects of climate change. And just to give you one very strange example that most people may find shocking, the Maa originally never ate fish, but now they're fish farming, and they're also eating fish. But they traditionally looked at fish as being a snake and a forbidden food to eat. So coming back to you, for us, Kenya hosting the Africa Climate Summit, and just by giving the example of the Maasai who have changed so quickly in the span of 4 years, for what they called taboo, to adapt to the changes, shows that as a country, we are in the forefront of saying that we are ready to change, we're ready to lead, and hence hosting this particular, the 3 major events, the Africa Climate Week, celebrating that, at the same time the Africa Climate Summit, which is happening, and of course the side event, which is being hosted by us also as Alliance for Science, the Climate Action Zone. So, and I'll speak a little bit more about why we're doing the side event a bit later on. Sure.
Do you think we're doing enough to highlight issues of climate change in this country?
No, we're not. Definitely not. No, we're just not doing enough. And
what would enough look like?
Well, enough would look like, I think first and foremost, I'm happy that, for example, being here in the studio, you are doing something about it. But I think when you listen, in fact, if you're probably to do, if you're to do some research and find out that how much is spoken about climate change across the vernacular stations, which is really where the most populace are listening to, not too much is being said. And but I also think that, but justifiably so, I think that I must also say that they may not have enough information or enough resources to be able to inform their conversations going forward. And like I said earlier on, as Alliance for Science, one of the things that we're very strong about, and one of the things that we've been doing, is trying to ensure that we can get the right people and the right information out, so that when you have that conversation, it is based on factual information and not based on hearsay and not based on myths, because it is such an important conversation that you do not want to mislead people in a wrong direction.
Yeah.
So one of the things I think that is very important is that, well, you probably know this, climate change has actually been discussed by scientists for the last 3 decades.
Yes.
But it's only people now, over the last probably 3 years have actually paid attention to it because they're now feeling it directly within their lives. So it's now, we really need to move the conversation away, from the scientists into the homes, into the households, and we have to find a way of doing that.
Then Michael, I'd counter that and say that we've been having conversations about climate change.
Yes.
Just not framing it the way you scientists would frame it.
Right.
It's a framing that's different. So scientists would frame it from a point of, the globe is warming, these are the degrees, this is what's happening, this is like that. But people have been talking about how things are changing in their hood.
I think you're right in
People
that.
talk about, we used to have this kind of seasons and predictability in our seasons. Now we don't. We used to be able to grow this kind of crops and they would mature in this long. Now they are maturing in shorter or longer. We used to be able to grow this. Now we can't grow it. We are adapting to this. So conversations are happening. Just not the way the globe has framed climate change conversation.
I think you may be right in that, and I must say that as in the scientific research centers and scientific institutions are very closed in terms of how they engage with the outside world. I do accept that, and I do agree. And one of the things that is very important and that is not happening is that that has to change. It has to be reframed so that then more and more people can actually have insights into what it is that they're saying. And then the other thing is that, and scientists are not the best communicators. I must also say that.
Yeah.
So that's also one of the challenges. But I think it's also a good challenge because it then gives room and space for people like yourselves to be able to come up with products and, for example, like podcasts that are able to now break it down in a manner and in a language that can be consumed by people and link it the way you've said it. For all these years, the things that you've been saying about the change of seasons, this is how it relates to what is happening within the research institutions, and that's how it links with the things that you've been talking about that have been happening around yourselves. So that is true. Yes.
So have people made the link then between how climate and the environment has changed and how it affects their livelihoods? And even as you say that, the scientific jargon over the years has been that it's been elite, it's been sophisticated. Not to say that the people who are consuming this are not, but that the language that has been used over time, and I'll give an example. A scientist sat in this chair a few months ago, and we've been hearing the climate conversation for 15 years. But in the words that she spoke is the first time that I was able to understand exactly what the greenhouse effect was. I've heard it. Yeah, I was in school, greenhouse gas. I never got it until she said it in that manner. And then now you're able to make the link between, what she's saying and the things we see. That why you cannot be walking along a terrain somewhere and see trickling water and tadpoles like we used to see when we were younger.
Yes.
And for her to make that link between that and what we actually see happening, do you think that today, 3 to 4 years ago, is now when you say people are actually saying, wait a minute, this is how we can change? Do you think now the link has been made between the science and the reality?
The links are being made, but we still have a long way to go. I need to be honest about that. If the links were so well made, then I think more people would be paying attention to what's happening next week. More people would be interested. There'd be a lot of noise, there'd be a lot of conversations, but it is so removed from what they know or what they perceive to be the things that have affected their environment. And I guess that's why, for example, we have actually put up what we're calling the Climate Action Zone. And the whole idea behind the side event, which is the Climate Action Zone, which is going to be at Radisson Blu, is first and foremost to ensure that the average farmer, the young person, the women can come into the room and be part of the conversation and can also understand things at a level in which they want to engage. So we have very purposefully moved away from, we're supporting what is happening within the main summit that is taking place. But, when you walk into those rooms, first and foremost, a lot of when you walk into a room where policy matters are being discussed as a young person, you're very intimidated because first and foremost, the people who are there don't look like you.
Yeah.
So already
Feeling
keeps you,
excluded.
yes, exactly, already intimidates you. So what we have done is we've created a whole different zone where we're allowing different players and different actors to come in, where we can demystify, where we can bring in people, as you have said, who are able to break down the matters in a way in which people can understand. But more than that, we're actually allowing people to have open conversations and to say the things that surely matter for them and to them within this whole conversation of the Climate Action Summit. But the other thing is also, but people only don't know the things that matter when they can relate to them, as you have said, when you can actually explain that the reason why you don't see tadpoles in the water anymore is linked to it's linked to the emissions and it's linked to this. So unless you can explain that in a way in which they get it and they understand it, it'll never work. So one of the things that we have also done is that so yesterday we spent a whole day recruiting young people. And the young people that we're recruiting are actually going to be what we're calling our SDG heroes. Again, SDGs, you and I may understand what SDGs are, but I tell you not and I kid you not. If we're having this conversation, within our vernacular stations and everything else, we're speaking to ourselves. So what we've done is that we're bringing the SDGs to life by literally making them into superheroes. So we auditioned young people to come in so that they will be the superheroes. But then because it's young people who already were being auditioned, already we started the conversation. Now we're linking those SDGs, especially particular SDG number 1 and number 2, which is zero hunger. And of course, there's climate action and all that. But then we'll turn them into real life people who can now have a conversation with you. And you can now, they'll be dressed up and everything else, but you're now able to have a conversation. The person looks like you. He's more or less, he or she is more or less toned down and is not possibly dressed the way I'm dressed today and standing in front and looking at you. So I think it's very, very important that if this conversation is going to be owned by us, but beyond being owned by us, if this, as Africa, as Kenya, we're suffering the most. And we, for example, people may not understand that, like a young person or somebody who's living probably in Kapenguria or somebody who's living in Lamu will not understand that. Why would the climate envoy for Kenya, P.S. Ali, be speaking about, first of all, why would they have a climate envoy?
Yeah.
That's a totally useful waste of a position. Why don't we give that position for another to create for PS entrepreneurship and jobs?
Right.
Exactly. Why do we have a climate envoy? It is so important because the world committed last year in COP that they would resource Africa by 100 billion. They've never done that. So PS envoy, the climate envoy for Kenya, who's PS Ali, keeps reiterating that fact that we need that money. And the saddest thing is that at that 100 billion, what we actually need is actually 500 billion between now and 2030. Okay, and then out of that 100 billion, only 11.9 billion has been committed.
Only.
So, and you see, the person, honestly speaking, who will be affected more than this is the younger people who have a longer life than we do.
And they need to understand this.
And they need to understand this. They need to understand why is it that we have a climate envoy? Why is it that climate action is here? And why is it that they need to take up this conversation and they need to push it at the level to their local politicians so that then it becomes a subject matter, because this is a loss to us.
So then, Michael.
Sure.
So who attends the climate action zone at Radisson Blu? And how different are they from those that are attending the main summit at KICC?
So, the summit at KICC, as you know, has been convened, and credit, we must say, rightfully goes to President Ruto, who was very clear when he went to the AU summit and said that we had to have a summit whereby we moved beyond talk and we actually had pledges. and commitments being made. And that was the whole background towards the Africa Climate Summit, which is taking place next week. The Climate Action Zone, for us, is a side event that is parallel to the Climate Action Summit to ensure that the other players who ordinarily, like the farmers who I've just spoken about, the young farmers who may be, who may probably be growing something in Elgeyo Marakwet, who may be growing something in Kilifi, are able to come in and also say that for us, our lives have changed dramatically because of A, B, and C. Yeah. And for us, these are the things that are important, so that also at the end of the Climate Action Zone, there can also be a declaration which can then be passed on. Now, one of the things that is that if you're not present, if your voice is not being heard, then you're not there.
Yep.
So we're trying to ensure that we can amplify those voices and ensure that those voices will be present. And let me make it clear, the voices are going to be at the African Climate Summit Zone, at the Climate Action Zone in Radisson Blu, are not only just from Kenya alone. We've ensured that we've actually brought people from around the continent. We're also ensuring that we're going to have like a deal room. So some of the financial commitments that people have been making before, we're very happy that the CEO of Green Building Climate from South Africa, they're coming in, and they're coming in to try and close some of the deals that are towards green building. Again, when you'll be at the main Africa Climate Summit, which is the government-run one of the things that's going to happen is that everything is going to be at a very high level.
Very, very top level.
Very, very top level. So for us, it'll be such a disservice when, first of all, this continent has the highest number of youngest people, but their voices will never count and will never be heard.
Okay, so I'm just trying to get, how do the young people access Radisson Blu? Are you inviting them?
We're inviting them, and
are you transporting them? Have you targeted, like you've mentioned Turkana in this conversation, you've mentioned Elgeyo Marakwet, you've mentioned various parts of the country where there are young farmers.
Right.
Have you recruited farmers from those areas?
So what we've done is this. So
come to Nairobi.
Yes, we have various sessions, and yes, we've been sending out invites, and we still, I will leave the later on. I'll actually give the email address here so that people can actually continue, registering and coming in. Yes, we have people who will be coming in from across the country. We're very happy that actually on what we're calling Day Zero, the governors from like Kipia, the governors from Homa Bay, the governors from Mombasa, will be present. So what we've done is we've actually ensured that we have communicated as much as possible to as many people through various informal networks, which are far lower than your mainstream media. We've gone through WhatsApp groups at the local level to ensure that we're really, really reaching out to people at the ground who ordinarily don't even have access to the newspapers, who ordinarily, and then again, young people have a different total mindset in terms of what they consume and how they consume it. So we've tried to ensure that we're in those spaces and in those platforms so they are aware about what is happening and what is going on. But also, we've also tried to ensure that some of the people who will be in the main summit will also come across so that then they can hear and get an understanding. We've also been very clear that we're going to have sessions moderated by fellow young people in a sense that, again, they do not feel intimidated. They don't feel that this is some high-level event whereby I can't speak and what I speak may be stupid. Coming back to what you've said, people are very scared. If I ask what is greenhouse? Am I looking stupid? Is it a stupid question? We're trying to say that this is your place to come and be you, to come and learn and to come and be informed
and understand.
So, Michael, even as we get into this, what are these amplified voices saying? Because we say it seems that already there's a demarcation between the scientists who are saying what they need to say about the warning signals that they've been sending out. We have governments led by one such President, William Ruto, who launches a summit like this in the country and for the continent, who are saying this is what governments must do, maybe having a little bit of a punch up with between North and South in terms of governments about their money and things like this. But then there are those who see and have to live with the effects of climate change and climate change over time. And we're saying that there's an understanding now about what's really going on. But what are they saying? Because they're not going to start saying whatever they're saying at the summits or at the zones next week.
No.
These sentiments must have already started.
Of course, you're right, Ndu. And I mean, let's be honest. One of the things that we must never shy away from is that, people in the global north, by the time we're sitting around the table, they had done their homework. They know exactly what they want. They've prepared themselves, far more than we did. But I also want to blame ourselves because, sincerely speaking, when we send in our delegations into such serious talks, half the time the people that we pick that go there are not the right people. You get people going for all the wrong reasons, and I think we've seen this, and this is just not peculiar to Kenya. This is across the continent. So we're not sitting on the table, and we have the wrong people sitting on the table. And I think I must also say rightfully, and you're definitely right. There are peddlers who are influencing things. Yeah. And I mean, we have to be honest about these things. Because we're not honest about them, we're never going to get to where we want to get to. So one of the things that we must be clear about as Africans is that we must be very clear about what it is that we want. And we must stop moving and shifting the goalposts.
But do we know what we want, Michael?
Yes,
do African governments know? Okay, let's just take different countries. Do we know what we want? I mean, I know what I feel about the climate conversation, but when we're looking at it from a governmental and policy level, country by country, do we know what we want? In order for us to build some kind of concert and unanimity around this issue, do we know what we want?
It's interesting.
What is that?
It's interesting. As of COP27, yes, we did know what we wanted. We're very clear.
Under the north to pay.
Yes. And then you see what happens is the moment we know what we want, then people who do not want us to get what we must have will do everything possible. And as you said, because we are multiple governments from multiple countries, then they will go in and, without a doubt, scuttle it. So we have to be, we need to, some of the bigger players in the scene, some of the bigger brothers on the continent need to stand
and
their foots down, take the lead, and say, no, nothing will go forward without these things on the table. I feel very sad. You probably know this, both, if I take the example of Namibia and Ghana, there's so much expectation in terms of the minerals, but they're very clear about what they want coming out of this going forward. So this is it. We've got to start coalescing around some certain issues and be clear about them and support ourselves going across. But again, it is interesting. I was reading something. I can't remember which country it was, where they were extracting. I think it was Niger, where they've been extracting minerals by this French company. And then what happened is, when the government changed and said that, okay, now you need to pay us more royalties. What they did is, now the subsidiaries started selling at a different arrangement, so that the royalties, which was increased, actually got to be less than what they should have gotten. So, look, these games have been there for a very long time, and that's I keep on saying that coming back to us, the younger generation has now got to learn that, listen, this is what has happened over the years and over the time. You've got to hold your governments accountable. You've got to push them. You must not give them room. You must not give them space. And that's why I keep on saying, it'll continue happening if the majority of the people who are actually affected have got no idea that these conversations even took place or even happened, and they rightfully do not have any idea, because your lives are so difficult. Our lives are so difficult. They're just trying to survive for the day. They don't have the bandwidth to start thinking about anything extra. But now, because your survival of the day is being affected, you're now listening. You now have no choice because now you're listening.
Yeah. And you
Because
start
that-
participating.
Yes,
in it.
because now you're seeing the direct effect in your house, in your home, in your life. So, coming back to you and coming back to what I'm saying again. So that's why for us it's very clear we want more and more people to
more
actually
participation at
more
this local
participation,
level.
Yes, at the local level. Yes,
Which
yes.
I think credit goes to the fact that we are hosting the first ever continental climate conversation, which says we are going to come up with a Nairobi Declaration, which we shall then take to the African Union, to the United Nations General Assembly, to the next global climate talks, which it's a beginning of harmonization of the African language and the African ask. In the lead up to next week, though, do you have an inclination of what the Nairobi Declaration will look like?
Well, I have an inclination of what some people are trying to move it away from.
Right.
And I need to, one of my reasons for being here, I mean, we're all Africans and this is our home and this is our country across the continent. We have to look after ourselves. So there's a group called PACJA, which is the Pan-African Climate Justice. And I think it's very important that we must pay attention to what they're saying. And we need to amplify what they're saying. And just some key things. So one of the things is that when some of the people have been trying to shift goals away from where it is that we should be, they did issue a statement, and we need to be cognizant of that statement where they've actually, and I'll just highlight just a very few things. So they're still advocating for fair and ecological, just and equitable transition to a low carbon, climate-resistant future that respects the right and dignity of all people. But I think the most important thing that they are saying, and which they're really pushing, is that for a participatory and an inclusive approach that engages all relevant and state actors.
Okay.
Okay. So I think to me that is the most important thing, because remember, despite the fact that over 19 presidents are going to be here between 17 and 19 over next week, they actually hold fort for us.
Yep.
So they have to listen to primarily what we say.
We have to send them to the table.
Exactly, to the table. Not necessarily what they will find on the table. I want to bring back to us. So, and that's why, Eric, I think it's great that you're doing this, but I think it's great and it's important that people must be aware that the Africa Climate Summit that's happening in Kenya is not some far removed event that has got nothing to do with their lives. It totally and absolutely affects their lives on a daily basis, whether you're in Malawi, whether you're in Mozambique. I mean, you all know about the cyclone that happened, Freddie, in Malawi. And look at what happened. Yes. More than 1.9 million people were totally displaced. I'm even scared of what's going to happen to us for the El Nino coming forward between September and now. I am actually really frightened because we don't have the resources. We're not ready. And then the saddest thing is that all this water is coming and nobody's going to harvest it.
Yep. It will go.
It'll all go. It'll all go. So, and again, and that's why when you heard me speaking that we're trying to get the counties in, because we're trying to ensure that some of these conversations are then being devolved down to a level where, they're then being carried over and being owned at that particular level too.
Coming back to what you've just said,
Sure.
You have an inclination of what some people are trying to
Absolutely, yes.
make sure they block from the conversations.
Yeah.
What should we watch out for
Anything
in the whole of next week?
Anything that moves away from the language that was agreed on already at COP27 last year, anything that is diverting us from that, we must move away from it. They must pay. On the finances, we must not renegotiate.
100 billion.
We must not
come.
We must not renegotiate that. That must be a totally closed area, non-negotiable, no discussion. Yes. That must be committed to.
Okay.
The West said they were going to do it; they have to do it. But the way, nature and God is very fair, extremely fair. If you can look at what's happening in the West over the last few months, all the climate deniers, all the people that said that this thing was some myth, some hoax, they've now actually seen it right at their doorsteps. So, but they need to be fair and honest to us because we've met the biggest brunt of it. And the other thing is this, one of the things that we need to understand as a people, as a country, why is it the Africa Climate Zone and why didn't each country do its own? First and foremost, our ecological zones, our resources go beyond the borders. Mm-hmm. They're shared. The cloud doesn't come, the rain doesn't come and stop at the border of Uganda, and then it doesn't come across Kenya. They are shared. They're shared. If you look, there's this beautiful book which I keep saying, it's a coffee table book, and I really want to buy it. I once saw it at the UN that had all the tributaries of the rivers of Africa. Mm-hmm. And if you saw them, the main arteries and everything, how it goes across the whole continent, then you understand just how interconnected we are.
It's one word.
And that's, thank you. And that's why we must have that one voice on that table. So we must protect the issue of climate finance. Mm-hmm. That is one area that we have to protect. But again, going back, the language that was agreed on at COP27, that must stand.
Mm-hmm. But does that give them a carte blanche? Now, if they pay 100 billion shillings, yes, are we giving them the license to continue polluting?
No, we're not.
What are we saying?
No, the document is extremely detailed. And anybody who's listening, please kindly do Google, because you can't find it. Just Google the Nairobi Declaration. Mm-hmm. Please Google it and please read it. It's not that deep in terms of what is there. It's important that we be aware. It's important that we consume this thing so we know why people are here, so we can contribute to the conversation. Because a lot of you who are listening here are actually going to be there. So if you're going to be there for the right reason. Be there for ourselves. Be there for you.
Yep.
Be there for your family. If that's the best way that I can possibly put it. Pay attention to the details, because it does affect you. It does affect us. It's not some far removed thing that is for somebody who's in Paris or somebody who is sitting in New York.
Michael, one of the things that we can't run away from, and I think you're alluding to this,
Sure.
100 billion that was committed to for payment, it's not so that something can happen. It is because something happened.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's why this money is coming. So once you pay it, then we're looking at perhaps a little bit of the loss then has been compensated for. We're not saying that you pay this so that then moving forward you can, okay? But this conversation, I think, is at the very heart of, other conversations that will be taking place next week. That there's still very many people who feel the African continent, within the African continent and other countries in the global south, who feel that they should not have to participate in all this climate business because, again, we're bearing the brunt of actions having been taken by the global north, and now we all have to suffer, and we're now being asked to participate in a process. It all sounds like one, hypocritical position after another. But what do we do about that particular sentiment? We cannot fault it because it is true. But how can we say that we would like to move and make sure that we do not continue to suffer, even though certain things did happen?
And do you make a very good point? And that's why, again, I'd encourage people to read the Pan-African Climate Justice Statement. It's called the PACJA report. And it's very clear in terms of what you said. It goes beyond, like what you said, just a conversation, but it demands that going forward, some certain things must stop and must not happen. We must first and foremost, the push to get us to consume some certain kind of energy resources which are not aligned and which are actually dangerous and do nothing to help the situation should not be on the table. One of the things is that first of all, there's a lot of geopolitical and economic interest in these things, and that is why a lot has changed over the last few weeks, as in who will be coming and who's trying to get into the room, into the Africa Climate Summit. In fact, you'd ask yourself, this is meant to be an Africa Climate Summit, why the big interest from so
non-Africans?
many, yes, from non-Africans. What is it? Because they want to ensure that their influence remains and stays, and exactly so that they can get away with what you're saying. So I think we're very clear that the payment is because you need to pay for what you did.
Yeah.
It's not you're paying because you're doing anybody a favor, But then going
Not
forward,
benevolence.
yes, it's not benevolence. I think that's very, very
it's
clear.
reparation.
Yes, and that has been debated, that's been contentious for very many years, and that was cleared up at COP27 last year.
Right.
So let us not, once we've agreed on something, let us stop, trying to reopen it and renegotiating on that again. So that needs to be a closed chapter, and we now need to move forward into what next that we need to do. Yes.
Somebody's asking, when you talk about carbon neutral, low carbon, what exactly do we mean?
Well, okay, so carbon neutral, and I'll try and be as simple as possible. So one of the things is that when all the gases go up into, when all the carbon goes up into the air, it actually eats on. Okay, so I need to stop.
All right, here we go. Now this is what
Exactly.
Climate for Africa does.
Exactly. Yes. So carbon neutral simply means that this is it. That can we have resources, and can we have products that we're using that are not ensuring that the rain patterns, the drought, continue being enhanced.
So we reduce our emissions.
Exactly.
Is it we reduce our emissions or we increase our absorption?
Both simultaneously. We've got to do both together. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Both.
Which brings me now to the issue of carbon trading.
Yes.
And there are some communities in this country that are benefiting from carbon trading. But is it fair and just?
No, it's not fair and just, but at least they're benefiting. But it's not fair and just because, like I said, people don't understand a lot of the people who've negotiated on their behalves have not been very honest about the things that they've put on the table. And again, that's why we keep saying that we need to have more and more people in the room. Last week, we actually had a convention where we brought across lawyers, environmental lawyers from across Africa. And the whole idea behind that was we want to ensure that people in the law fraternity also have an understanding. So when you're actually in court, when you're actually debating these things, you're clear about it. You're not at a place of disadvantage. So we have extended and we continue to work across and with different groups of influence that are so important within the ecosystem. We're very happy that next week one of the people who are actually going to be at the summit is Lady Justice Chiwatama, who's from Zambia, and she's been handling very complex issues in her court around people who have been brought to court because they uprooted or they cut vegetation, but she had never linked it with climate. So she'll be here to share some of her experiences. So I think what we're trying to do, again, as I'm saying that, we're trying to show the linkages between, and we're trying to ensure that if the lawyers, if the judiciary, if all these other arms do not understand what's going on, for us, it's a co-convening space so that these different voices can come and interact, and we're able to ensure that more and more of us, especially the so-called professionals who finally make the big decisions, who are on the table, are able to make better decisions for us as a people and as a continent.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
So back to what the Alliance for Science is planning for next week.
Sure.
The Climate Action Zone.
Absolutely.
It's going to be at the Radisson Blue Hotel. And this is the Upper Hill one.
Exactly. At the Upper Hill one.
Okay.
Precisely.
What dates, what times,
So
how will one register?
Great. So I'm going to give, because like I said, we want to ensure that even those who may not have access to internet can register. I'm going to give a phone number first, so that then it is very easy for people to get in touch with us. So the number is 0722 856 772. Speak to Barbara. She will help you register so that you can be able to come on board. But if you have access to the internet, please go to the website climateactionzone.org. I'll say that again, climateactionzone.org. It's all one word. And I'll just repeat the number one more time. That's 0722 856 772. Speak to Barbara. And like I said, we do want to have as many different actors and voices in the room.
Registration is free.
Registration is free. There's no charge at all for registration.
What should one expect when they come there?
Well, one should expect, being able to come and meet with people from, great. We have some delegations coming in from Bangladesh, some farmers from Bangladesh, to also some south-to-south collaborations, so they can see and they can hear what they have done and how they've mitigated their crisis, which has been there. We have different scientists. We're going to have different forums on green building. We have another on relief to resilience. Okay. So we have a fairly diverse and eclectic mix of things that are happening around the matter of climate change and the African Climate Summit. So I think it'll be an interesting space for people to come and learn, engage, meet, but most importantly, lend their voices to what they want and must happen at the end of the week.
So panel discussions, plenary sessions,
yes, exhibitions too. Yes, we do have some exhibitions also. We probably have about 15 different exhibitors and different booths which will be there too. Yes.
One who's not able to attend,
yes,
can they follow this online?
Absolutely. We're actually going to be so some of the sessions we will be live on Facebook, on YouTube, and also on terrestrial TV. So if you do follow the hashtag Climate Summit Zone, you're able to keep up with us, so that then you can find out exactly.
Action Zone.
Climate Action Zone. That's going to be the hashtag. So you're able to keep up with us, and you can able to know where we're at, especially if you're in a distance and you want to join us via YouTube or via Facebook. We will be transmitting live too.
Okay.
Absolutely, yes.
Something to look forward to.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing that there'll be all these multiple conversations taking place in Nairobi next week. So
yes.
At the end of it, yes, we hope that we'll have one united voice and more awareness among all our communities. Michael, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Eric. And I must say this on air. Anytime I go for a VO, it's either Eric who gets the job and not me.
All right, next one I'll walk out.
Not a problem, but good work, and thank you all for having me here. And please, if you have time, do come across.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Michael Onyango, Deputy Executive Director, Alliance for Science. He's been our guest this morning. Keep it here for more.
This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.